Here on Redoubt Productions, we tend to visit military sites, historic battlefields. Well, behind me is a hallowed ground, but not because a major battle was waged here. Rather, these grounds are considered a shrine to the 28th Division of the United States military. In this video, Retracing History, we're going to talk about what transpired on these grounds to turn it into a shrine, and we're also going to explore the Pennsylvania Military Museum, which is located here in Boalsburg, Pennsylvania. The ground which we currently stand on was once part of a large estate of the Boal family. Now, the Boals moved into this valley in the early 19th century. They were Irish immigrants. And one of their descendants, Theodore Boal, was not born here. Theodore Boal actually was born out west, and he developed a career in architecture, creating a variety of different hotels, storefronts, and mining operations in the late 19th century, going into the 20th century. In fact, some of them I looked up are still on the National Register of Historic Places. For those Western viewers out there, Theodore Boal sounds familiar. This is where his ancestors were from. In the early 20th century, Europe was looking like it was about to explode into conflict. And indeed, that happened in 1914 with the assassination of the Archduke and Duchess of Austria-Hungary. So all these European countries are fighting due to centuries-old alliances to kings and monarchs. It is getting very ugly very quickly. And some people in the United States of America are suspecting we are going to go to war in Europe. Other people are opposed to this. They're saying, hey, this has nothing to do with North America. Let's stay out of it. Let's make America strong. Let's be the superior country when this mess blows over. But there was a group of individuals that got involved in what we now call the preparedness movement. Now, it was no formal organization, but it was like-minded individuals, particularly those of some wealth, that decided they were going to prepare themselves to be leaders in the United States military should we have to intervene in Europe. So one of those individuals that was believing we're going to war in Europe was Theodore Boal. In 1915, he is going to take himself and his son over to Europe, and they're going to volunteer in the French military. Now, his son actually was involved with the cavalry, while Theodore himself, he was involved in the canteen business. So he was behind the lines providing foods and goods. After about a year's worth of seeing what was occurring over in Europe, the Boals are going to return to their estate with the intention of raising a company of mounted machine gun troops for the National Guard. Training of the company, initially of 33 in rank, began on these grounds in the spring of 1916. By the end of the year, Boal had been elected captain, and his troop were sworn into state service with the cavalry. They soon received their first assignment, being stationed along the U.S.-Mexico border with other elements of federalized National Guard units in the wake of the Pancho Villa expedition. Mexico would in fact play a hand in making the Great War even larger when British intelligence intercepted what's known as the Zimmermann telegram. It revealed efforts by Germany to entice Mexico into reclaiming lands that had been lost in the 19th century to the U.S., should the U.S. go to war against Germany. For this reason, the United States declared war on Germany. And Boal's troops is going to swell in size. We go from initially 30 men to about 70 men when he went to Mexico, and eventually a little under 200 men are going to muster here in the summer of 1917. And they're going to be trained not as cavalry, but as a machine gun battalion, technically Company A of the 107th Machine Gun Battalion. And the whole Pennsylvania National Guard, well, we were reorganized as the 28th Division and were federalized into service of the United States military, and we're all beginning to be trained to go overseas. On these grounds, Theodore Boal is going to create a mock trench, actually located pretty near to where the highway is today, at least if I go by the sources from the Pennsylvania Military Museum. And he's going to train them in the art of operating machine guns and operating in trench warfare. And in 1918, they are going to be sent over to Europe. They're going to be on the Western Front, and they will see action. 12 of the men that made up the 107th Machine Gun Battalion, Company A, they will be killed in action. War ends in November of 1918. The survivors come back here, try to return to their lives. And beginning in 1919, Theodore Bull is going to try to keep the camaraderie that he has established. I mean, you have to keep in mind, Bull's troop, they were together for about 3 years, starting in 1916 through 1918. So they want to keep together. They're all friends now. I'm sure some of them were directly family by this point. And beginning in May of 1919, they're going to have regular meetings here on the Bull State property, which was once Camp Bull. And the Pennsylvania National Guard would use this portion of Bull's estate as training grounds in the interwar period between the Great War and the Second World War, although they would stop those operations upon Theodore Bull's death in 1938. Now you're going to notice back there, what is this all about? What's all this masonry over there? Well, beginning in 1919 with their first meeting here, a memorial was established to honor those that had served in the 107th Machine Gun Battalion, Company A. Then, in future reunions, members of the 28th Division would establish memorials to individuals and units that served in Europe during the Great War. What had started as Camp Bull was now developed into the 28th Division Shrine. And that wall up there holds names of servicemen who lost their lives in both of the World Wars. And there are monuments all across this property, which is now the Pennsylvania Military Museum, dedicated not just to the 28th Division itself, but to some other aspects of Pennsylvania military life. And still, on the third Saturday of every May, the 28th Division hosts a ceremony to remember those that served and died in previous conflicts for the 28th Division. And one more detail, the 28th Division now is known as the oldest operating division in the United States military. Technically, its roots officially go back to the 1870s. However, some of these units that were part of the 28th, they trace their lineage back all the way to the 1740s, to when Ben Franklin organized associators to defend the frontier. I think what we're going to do first, we're going to go and explore inside the Military Museum, get to see what they have on display. Then we will go out and explore the shrine itself. Before we even step into the museum, it is a history lesson in itself. Back in the early 2000s, when they renovated this building, they decided to put on a unique facade, which is a wall of honor, showing the ribbons for a variety of awards that can be received for service in the United States Armed Forces. Of course, up in the top left, you have the ribbon for the Medal of Honor, the highest award an individual can ever receive in the services of the United States military. The top row is a variety of different combat and heroism medals that are awarded. Just to the right of the Medal of Honor is the Distinguished Service Cross. And you got the Navy Cross, Air Force Cross, Silver Star, and the Bronze Star. And the row down below, of course, off to the left, you have the Purple Heart. Then you have the Army Commendation Medal. I can't speak right now, I apologize. The Navy and Marine Commendation Medal, Air Force Commendation Medal, Coast Guard Commendation Medal, and on the end you have the Prisoner of War ribbon. Then off to the left here you got the ribbon that would go to a medal to any veteran who served in the Great War, the First World War. Next to them is the World War II Victory Medal, Korean Service, Vietnam, Pennsylvania Commendation Medal, so if you served in a campaign for the state of Pennsylvania. And on the far right, you actually have the Major General Thomas White ribbon. Very cool way to educate the public on all of the medals that were awarded by the United States military. So the mural that's up here, it was painted when the military museum first opened back in 1969. The gentleman that did this was actually a German soldier in the First World War, so this is based on his personal experiences of what he witnessed on the front lines. They have a very cool collection of artillery pieces showing the evolution from the 18th through the 20th century. And for those that have always wondered what's the difference between a cannon and what is a mortar, well, they do a really good job down here explaining it. So a gun is a cannon that's firing at a low angle, essentially it's going straight across into the target. Mortars, those would lob shells in an arc. Now, their distance was shorter than a howitzer, and a howitzer could lob a shell quite a distance. The creation of the howitzer, that may be the single most dangerous piece of artillery created in recent military history. Of course, we recognize this. This is a Napoleon, 12-pound broads Napoleon that was used by both sides during the American Civil War. But I'm more interested in what's down below. This is a Mexican 18-pounder that was casted in France and was used by the Mexican army against American forces during the Mexican-American War. This particular piece was captured by Pennsylvania troops in the 1st and 2nd Pennsylvania Volunteers. And there's an inscription on here that was put there by the Pennsylvania troops. The piece was captured in April of 1847 at Cerro Gordo. Now, you must forgive me that I don't know too much on tanks. What I do know, this is an M1917 model tank. This is the first American-built tank. Now, basically a copy in terms of body from the Renault tank that France was using in the war. There were some improvements. The seating was altered. The motor was moved to the back. And on a number of these, including this one, the turret now actually moves. So now you can fire in a much wider periphery than just shooting forward. This particular tank was not used in World War I. There are some dents, like the one you see up there on the hood up there. There's a few others on the side. Those are genuine bullet dents. Those aren't from battle. It's from the maker test-proofing the armor plates. So this was built sometime in 1919. The reason it survived is because a gentleman in Everett, Pennsylvania purchased the tank, and by the time he had gotten it, they replaced the historic motor with a motor for a Model A Ford. And during World War II, he hid this in a haystack, reportedly, so it wouldn't be scrapped during the metal scrap drive that fueled the war effort during that conflict. Eventually, it was restored to its original paint scheme, as 1917 tanks would have been used in France during the conflict, and it's one of the crown jewels of the military museum's collection. One of the scariest weapons ever created by man, the flamethrower. And this one right here, this is actually a German flamethrower from 1918. I think some of you movie buffs, if you watch the remake of All Quiet on the Western Front, you'll probably recognize this design. And then behind it is the M1A1 flamethrower that was used by American forces in the Pacific Theater during the Second World War. From the First World War to the Second World War, they had improved upon its accuracy, well, let's just say that, and this had the ability to throw a stream of flame up to 45 yards, 3 times as far as its predecessor. Well, we got guns. A lot of big guns here. And since I'm not much of a 20th century military historian, I'm gonna look like a dunce here and say I don't know what I quite am looking at. I do know that's a Lewis gun. I recognize the turret. But I'm gonna give you a sampling of the placard down here. If you wanna pause the video right now, and and then you can correlate it with what is in this room. They got a really cool display on the birth of aviation warfare. I love the wooden propeller here. That's from the era of the Great War, but what I'm really interested in is the Marlin machine gun they got down here. So when the United States entered the Great War, we wanted to put the Browning machine gun on our biplanes, but we had to wait for some time for the war machine to kick into effect and all the industries to mass produce it. So in the time being, they came up with the Marlin gun, which actually proved to be revolutionary in itself, as this was one of the first gas-operated machine guns, and it was successfully synchronized, so when it fired, it was in short bursts, so it didn't, shoot through the wooden propellers. So you could keep firing forward, and it would automatically pause to allow the blade to go past. So they ended up using these on a variety of aircraft in the interwar period. And actually down here, you can see it being fitted on a DH-4 biplane. And we talked a little about the DH-4s when those were some of the planes that were used in the Marine Corps maneuvers in Gettysburg. Something else I've never seen before on display is the Liberty Rolling Kitchen here. These were produced to feed the Army, and each kitchen could feed 200 soldiers free meals a day. And these ones were expressly popular with the United States forces during the Great War. And it was easy to hook up to any mechanized vehicle and get it moving. This one, they don't know quite when it was made, but it was used by the 28th Division in the interwar period. I cannot leave the Pennsylvania Military Museum without talking about the Bantam reconnaissance car. You know it more simply as a Jeep, though that title was not technically used in the development. The United States military needed some type of reconnaissance vehicle to move officers, communications, stuff like that across the battlefield as quickly as possible over any type of topography. And various car companies throughout the United States worked for a solution around 1940. And one company in Butler, Pennsylvania, the Bantam Car Company, came up with this right here, the Bantam Reconnaissance Car, the BRC-40. And the United States military loved what they had come up with. They made a few modifications, and ultimately over 2,000 BRC-40s would be produced in 1941. Most of these would not, however, be used by the United States military. These were actually sent over to Great Britain and Russia for the Lend-Lease program. Yes, that's right. There were Soviet Union personnel being driven around the battlefield on the Eastern Front in Bantam reconnaissance cars. It did happen. The Bantam did not produce them for very long. The contract to produce what we know as the Jeep today, it went to Ford, and they developed the Willys Jeep, which was mass produced to Kingdom Come. And of course, this type of vehicle is going to create a whole new trend in the, I guess what is called the automobile world, especially in the United States of America, as the Jeep is still a very popular design of vehicle that is used. There's whole clubs built around it. But I always like reminding people, it all started with a small car company an hour north of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Well, that's going to wrap up exploring inside the Pennsylvania Military Museum. Now we're going to actually go over and explore the 28th Division Shrine. Well, we're here at the shrine itself. There's a lot to take in and cover. I don't know how much we're going to focus on this episode. I think a return visit would be in order to really get everything in detail, but I'll try the best I can. I was informed by the site director that the landscape of the shrine is to reflect the landmarks the 28th Division encountered during the Great War. That includes the stream, which is to represent the Vessel River that the 28th fought tenaciously to get a bridgehead across in the summer of 1918. The woods behind the shrine are intentionally planted to appear as the Forest of the Argonne, where the deadliest offensive the AEF would participate in during that conflict. So the stone wall that makes up the shrine has the names of officers that were killed during the Great War. In addition to having their names on the stone, down here, it's hard to see a lot of them, but they actually have who presented them. This one is presented by the Auxiliary to Lancaster Post 38 Society of the 28th Division. Now, they don't have the enlisted men individually named on the wall here. Rather, they got four large blocks here dedicated to each infantry regiment that went into the Great War. This one's for the 110th Infantry. This one holds a special place in my heart because the 110th Infantry was based partly out of the region of southwestern Pennsylvania I am from. And the 110th is still around today. It's still a participating regiment in the 28th Division. There's a number of armories set up from where I'm from that still have the names outside. My father served for the 110th Infantry when he was part of the National Guard. Of course, those are different men, not the ones honored here, but nevertheless, the lineage carries on to this very day. We're currently in the row dedicated to the officers, the 111th Infantry Regiment during the Great War. I am wondering though, Robert H. Root, he's listed as a lieutenant of the 110th, dying November 2nd, 1918 in Varsu, Alir. I'm wondering if he is truly of the 110th or this is a misprint. One of the few comforts that are available to somebody who is gravely wounded and on the verge of death in the military, especially during the Great War, were chaplains to give religious guidance at the final minutes of some of these folks. Unfortunately, we have Michael W. Kiefer, who was a chaplain and first lieutenant of the 111th Infantry. He would die of wounds sustained September 8, 1918 in St. Gilles, Fismet. Amongst the names listed on the 109th Infantry officers is First Lieutenant Howard G. Taylor. Note when and where he was killed. He never got deployed to Europe. He was killed May 4th, 1918 in Hoboken, New Jersey.
The monument here is dedicated to Brigadier General Edward Sigerfoos. Sigerfoos is actually an Ohio native, and the reason there's an Ohioan with a monument in Pennsylvania is the 28th Division also has units in Ohio, Maryland, and New Jersey. But Mr. Sigerfoos had a long military career prior to the Great War. He had seen combat in the Spanish-American War. He was deployed in the Philippines. He had also been deployed in Mexico during Pancho Villa's expedition, and he even was deployed in China when he was called upon to be an instructor for the American Expeditionary Forces School of the Line, essentially their training school for all soldiers that were coming into Europe. And he impressed his superiors as a phenomenal instructor that on September 29th, 1918, he was sent into combat in charge of the 56th Brigade, 28th Division. 1 hour into serving as commander of that brigade, an artillery round would detonate and mortally wound him in the head. He would die October 7th, 1918. Now, what's interesting about Mr. Sigerfoos' story is, on October 10th, Congress had promoted him to the rank of Brigadier General. Technically, he was under the rank of Colonel when he was put in charge of the 56th Brigade. They did not realize that he had been killed in combat about 10 days earlier. When they realized this error, a few years after the Great War was over, they altered the promotion records to say that he was promoted on October 4th, 1918, meaning technically he was a brigadier general for a brief period of time as he lied mortally wounded in a hospital in France. Because of this, Brigadier General Edward Sigerfoos is the only American general killed in action during the Great War. And this monument also has a tie to where he was mortally wounded. The wayside cross that's on top of this masonry pillar, well, as you can see here, it was donated by mayor and citizens of Montbéliard, France, which is the scene of his mortal wounding. This monument's dedicated to First Lieutenant Henry Lamai by members of the 110th Infantry Regiment of the 28th Division. Mr. Lamai was part of the 88th French Territorials and was an officer advisor that was fatally gassed September 6, 1918. His captured gun is placed by his comrades in memory of Major General Asher Minor. Okay, you're probably asking where the gun is. Don't worry, it's still technically here at the Military Museum. Recently, they have taken it indoors to preserve it for future generations. It is now part of their artillery display. So this spot was intentionally left empty in the shrine until Theodore Bohl's death in 1938. Now, Bohl did not actually serve with the machine gun battalion he had formed on these grounds when they were deployed. Rather, he was attached to the headquarters of the 28th Division themselves. In 1997, a long overdue addition was made to the shrine, that being a list of all of the individuals in the 28th Division that fell during the Second World War. The 28th Division was deployed throughout 1944 and 1945. This is the most recent monument dedicated. It was put here in 2019 to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge. By mid-November of 1944, the 28th Division was stretched thin as a covering force along the Our River, which defined the German-Luxembourg border. The Germans launched a massive surprise attack on December 16th throughout the Ardennes. The 28th was hit by 7 German divisions. Hold at all costs was the order that came down from higher HQs. Desperate defensive combat ensued, with the Americans fighting for every inch of territory. Outgunned and outnumbered, the 28th bore the full brunt of the German offensive. The assault was slow to a halt, allowing the Americans to pour in reinforcements and crush Hitler's last-ditch offensive in the war. This is undoubtedly the greatest American battle of the war, and will, I believe, by the single greatest American victory of the war, said Winston Churchill. And here we have a monument tied to the Second World War. This is for the Bazooka Boogie, memory of the 28th Division band who helped defend Wiltz. That's right, the actual marching band for the 28th Division. They had to pitch in the fight to try to stall the German counteroffensive into the Ardennes during the Battle of Bulge. What's really interesting is the placard down here that we're looking at an exact replica of a stone that's located in Wiltz. That's pretty cool.
just begin to wonder where this monument was. Here we have the monument to the 10th Infantry Regiment of the 28th Division. Each pillar on the benches not only denotes each conflict the 1/10th was involved with, but also each campaign. Woro, Visly, the moves are gone. I apologize about my horrible French. And on the opposite side, we have the campaigns of the Second World War. Normandy, Northern France, the Rhineland, Central Europe, the Ardennes, aka the Battle of the Bulge. One of the larger monuments at the 28th Division Shrine is for the 107th Field Artillery. And boy, there's a lot to talk about this one. All these placards here denote the different branches and where they came from. This monument was erected by the Veterans Association and the 107th Field Artillery in memory of the faithful sons of Pennsylvania who served in the regiments in the Great War. The names inscribed on this monument are the names of the men and boys who were not soldiers by profession. They were ordinary citizens of this great commonwealth. When the call came, they put away their tools, closed their desktops, covered their typewriters, banked their fires, hung up their overalls, and went forth together to meet the enemy on foreign soil. They met the finest trained soldiers in the world and defeated them decisively in the battles of the Aisne-Marne, Bois-Aisne, Meuse-Argonne, and Yerbes-Lys. This they were able to do because they had faith in God and love of their country in their hearts. Sit here and rest. Let your eyes gaze on the beautiful mountains and valleys of Pennsylvania. All this beauty is yours to enjoy because men have fought and died to preserve it. God grant that the country will always enjoy this freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from want, and freedom from fear.